Hi, I'm Chris Lee, and this is Virtually Speaking. Joining us today is Dr. Deborah Berebichez, a chief data scientist who made history as the first Mexican woman to ever graduate from Stanford University with a Ph.D. in physics. Debbie has been the co-host of Discovery Channel's Outrageous Acts of Science for the past decade plus, where she uses her physics background to explain the science behind extraordinary engineering feats. Deborah has been featured by many media outlets worldwide, including Forbes, Wired, The New York Times, US and World News Report, and on the Travel Channel, Nova, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, Univision, and many more. Deborah completed 2 postdoctoral fellowships at Columbia University's Applied Math and Physics Department and at NYU's Courant Institute for Mathematical Sciences. Deborah's work in science education and outreach has been widely recognized by the Wall Street Journal, Oprah, TED, and by organizations like the American Association for the Advancement of Science, where she was named the If Then Ambassador for inspiring and empowering young women to learn science and to improve the state of STEM education in the world. So please join me now with the incomparable Dr. Deborah Berebichez. Well, hello, Deborah Berebichez. Thank you for joining me on Virtually Speaking. How are you doing today?
Chris, it's lovely to be here. I'm doing great, packing for an upcoming trip to Finland, moving with my husband and my 2 kids for at least 4 or 5 months, and then we'll see what the future holds.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah, so I see you have a background there that's very spacey. So is that the kids' room that we're in
We are,
because of
yes.
all the packing?
Both my husband and I are physicists,
Yeah.
and we love space, so our kids are very well versed into space. So here we go. We
That's a
at all
wonderful.
the planets, and my 4-year-old daughter comes up with theories of why we can't live in some, and the next day she comes up with a different theory of why we can. And they just were able to produce oxygen in Mars, by the way, so that was pretty cool.
In like a controlled environment.
Yes.
So that was
No.
the first that was the first time that's ever happened.
Yes,
And that was this week.
I think it was last week. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. So I would imagine if you're moving to Finland that you are probably going there for some science or technology related endeavor. Am I guessing right?
Yes. So what happened was that in the middle of the pandemic, my husband was being very strict about, not traveling and not, very much on the sort of super strict end of the spectra of people that we knew. So even leaving New York for a weekend was out of the question. So I was daydreaming. And one day, my friend Ulla, who I met in New York, she's from Finland, and she posted on Facebook that the Helsinki Business Hub was had created a program called the 90-Day Fin, which was inviting high-tech talent from all over the world, because apparently Finland needs a lot of young tech talent. And so I decided to apply, honestly, as a joke. Fast forward 3 4 months later, we were selected out of 5,000 people, and we are
Wow.
going whole family. And basically my job there will be helping high-tech companies and the job well the people in the job market bridge the skills that they need in data science or in STEM,
Ah,
so that they can hire the right data scientists and with the right skills, and progress. So they want to kind of recreate the Silicon Valley.
amazing. I love that. And of course, you're the perfect person to do that. You've been such a huge advocate for STEM and young people and women in STEM. And of course, famously, you have an incredible story that I want you to, of course, tell. But I'm going to kind of get to the punchline, which is that um, you became the first Mexican woman to get a physics PhD at Stanford. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Wow.
Yes.
And that was how many years ago?
About 14 years ago.
I'm sure there's been a lot of other great Mexican women who've done the same, and you were a trailblazer. But tell us a little bit about that story, because it's really a big part of what you believe in, and what drives you, and kind of where you come from. So it's important for everybody to know. You grew up in Mexico.
Yes, great. So I grew up in Mexico, and I grew up in a conservative community where women who expressed a desire to learn math and physics were discouraged from
Yeah.
doing so because, girls should study something more feminine. So from a young age, I was extremely inquisitive and curious, and I would ask questions about everything around me and nature. And my father, who was a civil engineer, was very fond of talking with me about the stars and bridges and how things were built and so on. Yet when I reached high school, I remember at the time I was reading, all of my friends said I was crazy when I told them that I wanted to study physics. And even the counselors in school said to me,
Mm,
no, 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 to study physics, you have to be a genius. And I knew I wasn't. And they also said, and plus, as a woman, it's impossible. The jobs are very long hours. You won't be able to combine it with a family. And it got
yeah.
me so scared that I became insecure about my own math abilities. And so I started to read stories about obscure physicists like Tycho Brahe, who is a Danish astronomer of the 16th century, who was he was a nobleman, and there's this legend that he lost his real nose in a duel, and
Wow.
his copper nose, which was the replacement they gave him at the time, is sits in a museum today in Prague, I believe. Anyways, I became fascinated by his story, and I said I will be like Tycho Brahe. In fact, my son is called Tycho because of that. And I said maybe I'll end up being like him. Like nobody will like me. I will be antisocial, but at least I'll have my meticulous science calculations to keep me company. And so these were my role models. And I couldn't really express that to people because I would be discouraged. So when it came time to pick a subject to study in college, I picked philosophy because I was so afraid of math. And people were telling me philosophy's just the same. You'll ask questions about why and the universe. And it wasn't really the same, even though I enjoyed philosophy. 2 years in, I decided to apply behind everyone's back to schools in the US to transfer and study physics because the voice inside me that clamored that I had to learn more math and physics was not going to go away.
Yeah.
So I applied to schools, and I was very lucky that universities in the US cost 8 times what we were paying for a private university in Mexico.
Hmm.
So my parents couldn't have afforded a regular university without financial aid, which is not really given to international students. But I was lucky to get a full scholarship from Brandeis University in Massachusetts that was awarded to me for 2 years as a transfer student. So I flew to Massachusetts. I arrived in the middle of the winter as a transfer student, and I was very passionate about physics. So my first semester, I had the courage to take my first almost no math intro to astronomy class. And in that class, I sat way in the back, and I befriended the teaching assistant, who
Mm,
was a grad student by the name of Rupesh from India. And Rupesh and I became friends, and I would ask him all kinds of questions about quantum mechanics and special relativity and Einstein. And it was just an adventure, incredible. And one day I told Rupesh, I just don't want to die
right.
without trying to do physics. And so Rupesh said, I'll call my advisor, who was the head of the physics department at the time, Dr. Wardle. He called me into his office, and Rupesh said, there's a problem. We have this girl who wants to do the physics major, but she only has 2 years left. And the full major takes 4 years
Right.
regularly. So Dr. Wardle said, we know somebody who's done this. His name is Ed Witten. And for those in your audience, Chris, that know who Ed Witten is, you'll realize what a crazy idea this sounded like, because Ed Witten is the father of string theory, which is one of the most popular physics theories today. And he's clearly a genius. He's a professor at Princeton. And he had switched many years before me at Brandeis from history to physics. And so they said, he was able to do it. We know what to do with you. He handed me a book called Div, Grad, and Curl, which is vector calculus in 3 dimensions. I didn't even know basic algebra. And he said, if by the end of the summer, in 2 months, you master this material, we'll let you skip through the first 2 years of the physics major
Wow.
so that you can finish your BA in only 2 years.
Amazing.
And I'll finish the story by saying that Rupesh was my first mentor. And I
Yeah.
love to tell this because he decided to devote his entire summer to
Wow.
mentoring me and tutoring me. And I always wanted to pay him for all that he did for me, because thanks to him, my mission in life, was born.
Yeah.
And he told me that when he was growing up in Darjeeling, like the tea in India, there was an old man who used to climb up to his town and teach him and his sisters tabla, the musical instrument,
Yeah.
math, and English. And whenever the family wanted to compensate this old man, he said, no, the only way you could ever pay me back is if you do this with someone else in the world. And that's what Rupesh did with me, a pay
Amazing.
forward engine, where he said, your mission in life now is to help and inspire other women or minorities who, like yourself, feel attracted to STEM, but who for some reason feel that they cannot achieve their dreams.
Right.
And so,
And so that's amazing. And then you ended up at Stanford somehow
yes, a
after
few years
that.
later, in disbelief, complete, just an incredible story. Also, I was in Mexico pursuing my master's, and I was again being told by everyone, okay, let's see if we can get you married and sort of stay in like regular society and all that. And I was just, again, with thirsty to know more about the world and physics and nature. And I said, I have to leave this environment. And
Right.
I applied to PhDs. And I went to my advisor in Mexico and I said, I learned that there's this man, this physicist called Steve Chu at Stanford. And I really like his research because he's manipulating DNA with lasers. He's like, his jaw dropped. He said, Steve Chu? And I said, yes, why? He said, do you realize he just won the Nobel Prize a few months ago? And I didn't know. He was later the Secretary of Energy during Obama's administration.
Wow.
And had I known, I probably would have been more shy. But I wrote him an email directly and I said, I love your work. I have a scholarship from the Mexican government. Can I come and work directly with you? And he said, yes.
Oh my God. So you had another incredible mentor
Yes.
in him, and then you went through all the way to PhD physicist.
I actually ended up switching because it was working with Steve in the lab was not exactly what I wanted to do. I ended up becoming a theoretical physics. So all I needed was a computer and thinking formulas and math. And I ended up working with another Nobel Prize winner,
No.
Laughlin. That's what you get when you go to places like that. And Bob and I remained friends, and he's a great mentor.
The name cut out right when you said his first
Oh,
name.
sorry, Bob Laughlin.
Wow. So that was your third, that was really your third mentor.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
mentorship is important, right?
it's hugely important in my life.
And in people's lives who want to succeed. I mean, doing it alone is often impossible, especially if you're in a sector of society where they kind of don't believe that you should be pursuing this.
Yes. I should say, yeah, something that comes to mind is when I was studying physics at Stanford, I recall that we spent maybe 2 or 3 all-nighters per week doing homework. This was a traditional thing, every
Sounds
freshman.
like fun.
Yeah. And so I consider the people in that group my friends, right? We didn't
Right.
really go out or anything, but they were my friends. And I attended the American Physical Society meeting, and I was with my Mexican professors walking in the hallway. It's a thousands of physicists, very large conference. And I said, oh, here come my friends. And because they had the badge and it said Stanford Physics. And I went like this, like kind of saying hi in a very friendly way. And they passed me by as if they didn't know me. And my professor from Mexico, I was like, I promise you, these are my friends. And he said, I believe you. They're maybe shy or whatever it is, but don't take it personal. And I think it was really hard for those 6 years to be in an environment where people like me, that is, people who came to physics later, who were not the math wizards, growing up that had won math Olympiads,
Yeah.
people who are female, because we were only two women in my whole
Wow.
graduate class of 34 people. So I felt that bias and I lived with it. And so I think it takes more courage to pursue those kinds of fields when you are the only one that
Yeah.
looks like.
That's amazing. And of course, you're such an inspiration to so many people. And I know you talk a lot about it. You're a huge advocate for STEM and for everyone to be able to succeed in it, because everyone should be able to succeed in it. But, I definitely am very excited also to talk about what's happening in the world we live in right now. And it's almost like, and I've known you for years, and it's almost like I keep hearing more and more now than ever the words algorithms and data and big data, and therefore you, a data scientist. So it sounds like to me, if I'm not mistaken, that data science is more prevalent, more important, more needed, and will be more a part of the future than ever. So this is probably a very exciting time for people like you and for you right now to look at the future of what's happening. So tell us about, am I right? And tell us what's going on.
Absolutely. Harvard Business Review came up with a sentence that said a few years ago, data science is the sexiest job of the 21st century. And I'm not sure I agree with that, but it did signal an incredible boom in the demand for people with analytical and computational skills to make use and make sense of all this large amount of data that we are collecting as the human species. The amount of data that we saw in physics in the 70s, or even now, like the square kilometer array in the Large Hadron Collider, the particle physics experiments, is so vast that I had the culture from physics of how do you use computing to choose things, to classify things. And so it was easy for me to translate those skills and those concepts into the world of data science when I pivoted and I became a data scientist. And as a chief data scientist at Metis, we got hundreds of people of all ages and all backgrounds taking our boot camp to transition to become a full-time data scientist. And we're not even seeing a tapering of the demand. That is, more and more companies are even being valued. Like the valuation of companies is sometimes based on the amount of data that they have.
Right. I heard about that. Something having to do with in Vegas, the casinos were having some issues. There was one major conglomerate that was having an issue with maybe going into bankruptcy, and then they realized upon analyzing what they had, the data they had was like what saved the company. And I've heard, and I know that this is the future. So it sounds like companies are really going to be hiring data scientists. I mean, it sounds like data is really the key to survival, the key to understanding your customers, the key to understanding. So tell us a little bit how that works. I mean, for a lot of people, they don't even know that data applies to them, but it does.
Sure. Yeah. I just want to interject and say that during the pandemic, we're seeing the numbers slow down of hiring data scientists because of a key issue. A lot of companies were hiring data scientists to speculate on things and to not directly related to profitability of the company, but just like, let's see if we can figure out a new demographic, or if we
Right.
change A/B testing, if we do this differently, what would be the results? Now we're seeing that the hiring is more with data scientists that are directly related to an at scale algorithm, to something that is already profitable, is part of the business, and is at a somewhat large scale. And so the way I explain, I teach and I talk about data literacy, for example, which is to say that data is not some complicated formula or algorithms that is in a blackboard in a university. It's not that. Data is everything that surrounds us. I teach it to middle school, high school students as well. And every app we use today, whether it's Facebook or a healthcare app to monitor your health, your weight, all of that is data. These are facts or factoids about you and everyone that surrounds you. And we've come to a tipping point where machines like our computers sometimes know, like Amazon or Netflix, know more about us than our own spouses, for example. And they're able to predict products that we are going to want to buy in the future by analyzing our data in aggregate with everybody else's data and preferences. And so now you see data is immersed in every process, from the janitor at the airports. I don't know if you've seen when you go to the restroom, there are like three little faces, green, yellow, and red, a frowny face, and you can click on one to comment on the state of the restroom. And
Wow.
so before they would clean every now and then, and it was all kind of manual, but now they get in their watch a signal saying, hey, too many people are clicking on the yellow or red button. So the data is influencing the timeline.
Yeah.
For that, I can give you tons of examples of entire companies that have to change their business model. Like Rolls-Royce, who used to build motors for cars, is
Right.
also in the business of building air turbines for
Yeah.
airplanes. And now, instead of being a hardware company that sells you this very expensive turbine that can fail in 20 years, now they're becoming a software management company, because what they do is you have the turbine, but they have embedded micro sensors in them. And IBM was able to do at nanoscale to write a little sensor that's a hundredth of the size of a hair, of one piece of hair, a strand. And so they embed these tiny micro sensors that continuously send signals to a program wirelessly, uh, giving information about the state of the airplane, the turbine. And
Wow.
so you will it's predictive maintenance. So you will know way beforehand when this is likely to break or stop working, and
Wow.
reduces the risk. And so now they're a different company with very different risks. And so we are in an era of iteration and agile invention and innovation, and where things can get created very quickly, and concepts can get tested by companies, and then they can be put in the market or not. And I have to add that this is why the whole emerging field of data ethics is so important, because the way that we all, and I teach about this as well, we build our algorithms is generally biased in one way or another. So for example, if I work in finance and I'm a bank and I want to sort of, instead of having people manually inspecting everybody's credit score and
Mm.
their situation in order to give a mortgage, I want to give that and outsource it to an algorithm.
Right.
So I have a machine doing that, and it saves me a lot of cost. And what happens is that I'm going to set the rules for that algorithm to classify someone as meriting a mortgage or not. And we've been shown that it's easily shown that there are many biases. So for example, if you feed it with data, historical data that traditionally has, say, African Americans not getting mortgages, then the algorithm is more prone to not giving a mortgage to an African American person simply by looking at zip code and this and that. And so we have to be very careful about engineering a future with the data we have that actually serves and mimics our entire diverse communities. And that's a big thing.
Yeah, I've actually heard that talked about recently with several other thought leaders and speakers and experts that I know, um, and it's really awesome to know that the biases that we've lived with are going to be written out of it and really obsolete, hopefully, because the data that we're analyzing is just based on a human being and his track record or her track record with payments or credit or also the amazing ability for algorithms and AI and data to predict what somebody is likely to be able to do or will do, with decision making or with success. I mean, that's to me mind blowing. How does that work? How does this data actually work where it
Yeah,
can say, you know what, Deborah Berebichez is likely to move to, no, I'm just kidding. I was going to say move to Finland, but I mean, really, what is it that it can
yeah,
predict, and how does it do it?
yeah. So what I do is I'm Amazon, let's say, and I collect data from hundreds of thousands and in fact millions of customers. So
Right.
I have Chris' data. He likes, say, sports, books, and he watches on Amazon Prime romantic movies. And he just had twins because I see his purchase habits, and he bought a lot of diapers last month, so the kids must be around age 2. So now I'm gonna try to recommend that he buys potty, because potty training is starting and whatnot. So what Amazon does is he takes people like Chris, and you are just what's called a vector. So you have all your likes and dislikes and interests and disinterest. You've clicked away, you've moved away from stuff they've shown you. So they do this in two ways. Either they take the object that you like, or that you bought, such as a romantic movie, and they have a table, a database that says everybody else that likes romantic movies, what else do they like? So they go into everybody's vector, and a computer can do this very quickly. So they look at John Smith. He is a little bit like Chris, around the same age range, similar zip code. He just had kids, and he just bought a humidifier for the room, for his kids' room. So then let's recommend Chris a humidifier. And so they'll recommend the object that thousands of other what's called proxies or Chris-like substitutes are buying. So that's one way in which they recommend. The other way in which they recommend, because they do the hybrid method, another thing to do is to look at the person. So instead of seeing at what objects you buy, is to say, okay, so you like The Cure and David Bowie. Those are things that I like. So,
I like
I'm
them
just
too.
protecting. But so you like that kind of music. And so, what kind of person are you? So I look at another person that also likes that and invent a new category. So what I'm saying is, beforehand, if you like romantic comedies, I recommended some different object, but here I'm going to get into a completely different category, and I'm going to predict that because you like that type of music, my models say that people who were born around that time or are trending towards that, you are highly likely to seek somebody to help you with your estate, or write your will or something in a certain year, in a window. And I'm going to send you those experts. It's a completely different category. It's not a product that you can buy, but it's a recommendation based on the
Likelihood.
likelihood, but because of your behavior, not
Right.
because of objects that you've bought. So it's making guesses, but they're pretty accurate guesses because you have a lot of people purchasing in these vast networks of data.
So it sounds like a lot of it is obviously advertising and marketing. What do you say to people who say, "Well, this is awful. The marketers are the devil, and I don't want my information out there"? Isn't the truth that we've always, with technology, really built it to help us? In most of the originations of the people creating that technology was we are going to help people do something better or make something easier for them. So isn't this really a good thing where, you know, when I'm looking, I've said this a million times on this show, where I'm in Instagram, looking occasionally at the feed, and the ads that are shown to me in Instagram are like the best ads ever. I mean, I have bought so many incredible products, from shoes to, technology that has changed my life. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I bought that. Or a great toy, for my kids, something that, and it's usually something I've never seen before. It's usually something unique. and totally something I would have liked. I've never seen advertising done as well as they do in Instagram. So I appreciate it because it's turning me on to great products that I am very interested in.
You're one of the lucky ones, because I tell you, with me, if I by chance Google a program for
Right.
women entrepreneurs, then, but it was just for one piece of research that I was doing, then the rest of the week I will just get ads for
Yeah.
women entrepreneur courses. So yes, I hear what you're saying. We've seen, Chris, that there's a line, there's a whole spectra. So people are, especially millennials and younger, are very willing and open to give up their privacy for some comfort and use that apps and our data insights give us. Whereas older generations are, we're a little bit more weary of having all our details out there. And there's this spectra, and people, constantly move around. There are times certain pieces of data in your life that you say, privacy is overrated. Who cares if they see, what I do, where I am? But then maybe something happens in that neighborhood, and you start to be more careful. And now you start caring about putting, logging in Facebook with a location on, and tagging yourself in certain areas. So it really all depends on what the benefits are. And I think that line is a line that's going to move in the future, because companies are being more and more pressured to provide a really good added benefit for selling our data. People are becoming more savvy, and they're saying, like, look at what happened with Cambridge Analytica, or even, Russians interfering in the election. Like, data is very powerful. It can change and affect our lives in ways that previously we didn't know of. Facebook can change our opinions on things that matter to us. And so because of that, people are not easily sharing as much information as they previously were with all these platforms, unless they see that by sharing something, they're going to earn a huge benefit.
What do you think is the most common area that companies are starting to look into as far as the data? Is it also about, what to do next? Is it also about what they are going to do next and what they should do next? Can data help companies figure out their own futures?
So typically, Chris, companies that want my consulting services come to ask me for one of three things. The first one is data literacy. I want to empower my whole workforce to use the data that we have. I don't want only a small 10 people group in R&D, in research, or in IT to be the data scientists. I want my HR people to be able to get data and use the data. I want my sales personnel to be able to give a discount when they have the data of the person in front of them, of the client, empower everyone. So how do we educate everyone about what data is, what data isn't, how to use it, etc. The second thing that people come to ask for when it comes to data science is deciding on what products and what features to include in a certain product. And so they'll release product A, and they'll release a slightly different product B with maybe one less feature. And they collect information from a beta group of testers who will give them the information needed to decide, what products should we put out, what features are important for this community, for this kind of people, etc. What should an upgrade look like? And thirdly is what you just said, a group of companies who are in the forefront of technology, like IBM and Xerox PARC and HP and Google, etc. They come and they say, we want to predict what the future of work will look like, what the future of education will be, what of childcare, and so on. And so by predicting those things, they can design algorithms, platforms, products that will serve the future of mankind.
Wow, that's awesome. So this is really an exciting time for anybody in technology. I'm excited that we get the inside information here from an actual data scientist, and that you are, in the middle of just an incredible career. And now you're going overseas, and you're going to be helping, really establish some more people in technology all over the world, which is another great thing that you're doing, of giving back, which has kind of been a theme for you for so many years, giving back and fighting for people's rights, and encouraging people to get into STEM and to be excited about science. So you're just an inspiration, and it's just so wonderful to catch up with you. And this has been really fun.
Likewise. I always like talking with you and sharing my thoughts on data and mentoring and how important it is. I just spoke a few weeks ago to one of my mentees. She was a high school girl when I met her, from Mexico, in New York, and she was very timid. But I noticed when I went to give a talk to her school that she was very curious about STEM. And so I kind of adopted her and mentored her, and she won Technovation Challenge, which is a great tech contest done all over the world now. And she won with a group of friends, and Google paid them $15,000, and they help her develop the app, which is now in the market and whatnot. And now she just finished her BA in computational science at University of Pennsylvania.
That's
So when you see the fruits of that, then I sleep a little better.
Yeah, and I know you've been really thinking about women and people who are of different diversities and ethnicities, and it must be a cool time for you to be alive, also to see that everybody's voice is now coming out more, being listened to more, and being championed more. So that's definitely a world that we're living in, and I don't think we're going to go backwards. I think we're going to continue to go forwards.
I agree.
Well, this has been awesome, Deborah. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great trip overseas. I'm sure we'll stay in touch while you're there.
Awesome.
And you'll be doing some virtual events for American clients, I'm sure, for a few months more. And this has been a real pleasure. Thanks so much.
Take care, Chris.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.